As we are talking about a couple of issues that have rolled in together. One is how important the doctor-patient relationship is and enabling doctors to prescribe treatments to their patients without government bureaucrats and governors and the media getting in the way of that decision-making process. And then also, of course, social media trying to prevent information about things like hydroxychloroquine with which they don't think people should be introduced. They don't think that Americans should hear anything about that particular discussion. So earlier in the week, there was a very interesting summit called the Frontline Doctors Summit. And it was fascinating because you had a bunch of doctors who got together to talk about their experiences in helping to treat patients and addressing issues of COVID-19. And we saw social media silence after tens of millions of people had viewed videos from this occasion, from the press conference. Social media had taken it down. Now, there's still video that is up, to be sure, but there are videos that were taken down because they were presenting information that was not in fitting with what the conventional wisdom among the elite has been. Beth Martin is the founder of Tea Party Patriots Action, and she joins us now once again here on Jimmy at the Crossroads as a co-organizer of this summit. Beth, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been quite a week.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. I mean, just kind of tell us how it all unfolded from the beginning. Let's just go in terms of the event itself, because everything else just kind of stems from a big, well-organized effort in the beginning.
Yeah, well, I've been working with Dr. Simone Gold, who's an emergency room doctor and a Stanford-educated attorney for several months now. I met her online, and we've been talking about her experiences treating patients that are coming into the emergency room and what she's seen both with COVID and for patients who do not have COVID. And we decided that we really needed to bring doctors together to talk about what they were seeing with COVID and with the lockdowns. And we had this summit to discuss that and to make sure that we could let people across America know there are some treatment options available today that we didn't even have available back in March or January or February when this virus first hit our shores, and to begin to reassure people that we're going to get through this and there's reason to have hope again. It doesn't mean we don't take the virus seriously. It means that because we take it so seriously, we can begin to have hope again. I guess that our desire to try to calm the fear down in America is not at all what social media companies want or even the mainstream media at this point.
Yeah, one thing that's so striking, I mean, there was a lot of talk about hydroxychloroquine, which we've discussed on this program over the last number of months, has been a treatment that, particularly if you get it early in COVID, when somebody is first diagnosed or early in that process, there's a lot of evidence suggesting that it actually works. I know you were talking about at the press conference and at this event yourself, Beth Martin, about Harvey Risch, who's a PhD and professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health. He published a tremendous op-ed in Newsweek. He's an author of over 300 peer-reviewed publications, holds a senior position on editorial boards of several leading journals, a very credible guy. And he says that particularly if you use hydroxychloroquine earlier on a patient in the process of COVID-19, it can have tremendously beneficial effects. Yeah, they were taking down videos on social media of doctors talking about this.
Yeah, that's exactly what was going on. So we had doctors who have been using this to treat patients, either to prevent COVID or if they get it in the very early stage. And one of the things that Dr. Risch, who is an MD and PhD, I believe he also has a PhD both, from Yale, professor of epidemiology, said in that Newsweek piece, and by the way, I do give credit to Newsweek for being willing to publish this. Most of the mainstream media has not been willing to do it. He said in high-risk patients especially, they should begin the treatment of hydroxychloroquine plus, I believe he said azithromycin. It's hydroxychloroquine plus. You've got to have one other thing with it at least.
Yes.
And he said, do it before you even get the test results back. It has to be very, very early. And the idea is to prevent hospitalizations and decrease hospitalizations and then ultimately decrease the number of deaths we're experiencing in the country.
Well, and that's such an important point about hospitalizations. There are certain parts of the country where we are seeing surges, and that means that a lot of hospitals now are finally getting close to or achieving capacity in their ICU wards, specifically oriented towards coronavirus, to COVID-19 patients. Well, if you can get them this kind of medication earlier on to help prevent the need for hospitalization, that's the real ticket. Because remember, Flatten the Curve, Jenny Beth Martin, was all about let's protect hospitals from being overrun. This seems like at least it can help flatten the curve in that way.
That is exactly right. And so that's what the doctors wanted to convey. And now, even though that is a focus and part of what we talked about at the press conference and within the conference itself, they also talked about how there are alternatives to ventilators. There are not a single patient in the country who needed a ventilator went without one. If you get into the hospital and you're in a more serious condition, there is remdesivir available. So the point was to let people know there are multiple treatment options that are available and that people are working with that have promising results. People are so afraid in this country, and we just want to make sure they have the information that they need. And you don't have to believe me. You don't even have to believe the doctors who I've talked to. I urge everyone, go talk to your own doctor and get a personal health assessment so you can figure out, do you need to be as afraid as what you might be conjuring up in your own head right now?
That is an important point, but also something, and I know you've been talking a lot about this in terms of reopening schools, a point emphasized at this summit as well, the Frontline Doctors Summit. The fear that I'm seeing from educators and so forth, the parents and what have you, that I don't think is rooted in the data. We've talked about on this program how children are very low risk, not just for getting it themselves or for serious health issues as a result, but also from children spreading to adults. There's very low risk of that based on the data that we've seen from numerous other countries around the globe. And yet there is this intense fear over the notion of reopening schools. And now schools, I know I'm broadcasting from Colorado, school district after school district after school district is now increasingly limiting in school education for students, which is really depriving them of some things that they need in order to develop educationally, socially, and in so many other areas.
Yes, that is exactly right. And it is something that is not fair to do to our children, especially given what we know about the virus now. It is not, when we open schools, we will not be the first country to reopen schools since this began. We know the virus, by and large, does not kill children. And we know that adults are learning how to socially distance themselves. We're doing it in grocery stores, we're doing it at Walmart, we're finding ways to do that in other parts of our lives. So I think that the adult teachers can find ways to do that in the schools as well. And then one of the things about hydroxychloroquine plus zinc plus azithromycin plus steroids, whichever combination may be the right one, is that if you are high risk or you're afraid, you could take this 65-year-old drug that is FDA approved, that is actually over the counter in some countries of the world, and that doctors have been working with for longer than I've been alive. It's safer than Tylenol as a preventative measure, or in the early stage if you should get COVID. It's I don't understand, when we're this early into a pandemic and we have some options on the table and we know it is a safe FDA approved drug, why people would want to pull this away and not even see if it works. And that's the thing that concerns me about social media companies. They're just quashing that opinion, and that'll prevent the leading to the body of knowledge to understand more about the virus and about treatment options.
Well, and Dr. Risch, who we mentioned before, wrote this op-ed in Newsweek. He identifies his first reason for why he thinks hydroxychloroquine is being disregarded is that the medication has become highly politicized. And that's indeed what we have seen. And then the FDA pulls this special authorization, emergency authorization back in June. And suddenly that gives everybody on the left credence to say, hey, this means that it is totally discredited and we shouldn't go ahead and even talk about the idea of hydroxychloroquine. And that's, nobody should, and I think you did have one doctor who did say is a cure. I don't think anybody should go that far as to say, hey, this is a cure that gives people the sense that it is in every instance it's going to work, even later in the stage. The point is to make sure that people are able to have a discussion, first of all, and know what to ask their doctors.
Right.
Because that's what it comes down to, is the doctor-patient relationship and decision-making process.
That is exactly right. Right now, there are two different things about what you just said that I think are important. First, if you're going to go talk to your doctor about hydroxychloroquine, it is so politicized right now. I would encourage you to ask your doctor a few pieces of information just so that you understand the medication. One, is it actually FDA approved? Two, if you're going to a country that has malaria, is your doctor likely to prescribe this to you? And three, is it a safe drug? Because right now, the media is trying to imply that this is an unsafe drug. The next thing I would ask is do doctors actually prescribe things that are not on label for FDA approved drugs? Meaning,
Right.
if it isn't something that is normally approved, if it's not approved to be prescribed on that particular item, do they still prescribe it or not? And the answer actually is yes. And it is lawful for them to do this. I've learned a lot about the reasons why. I won't go into that, but it's important to get these facts. And if the media isn't going to give it to you, then go ask your own doctor. That's what I would really urge. As far as the FDA pulling that emergency use authorization, I'm happy to get into that. I think the important thing to understand is that they issued it in the first place because some doctors around the country and the world were hoarding hydroxychloroquine the way other Americans were hoarding toilet paper and paper towels. That tells you what the doctors thought about what this drug would be able to do and the usefulness they thought it would have.
And again, as Dr. Risch points out and other doctors at the Frontline Summit, they were talking about, and they are emphasizing the point that it's how you do it, the right dosage amount, and also the timing of it. So I want to play cut 2 real quick. This is cut 3. This is Dr. Anthony Fauci on MSNBC, I believe, last night, and he was essentially being asked about how these videos have been taken down.
My family received an email yesterday from a young friend of ours, a university graduate. She's now back home in her village in rural western Kenya, asking us if now there's a cure because she had seen the video. And now I see today in the newspapers in Kenya warnings and columns to tell people, don't believe that video. If this can be transmitted around the country and globally so rapidly, we have to do more to stop these dangerous conspiracies from misleading people.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Andrea, and that's the reason why I'm very explicit and unambiguous when we say we've got to follow the science. If a study that's a good study comes out and shows efficacy and safety for hydroxychloroquine or any other drug that we do, if you do it in the right way, you accept the scientific data. But right now, today, the cumulative scientific data that has been put together and done over a number of different studies has shown no efficacy. So when there's a video out there for a bunch of people spouting something that isn't true, the only recourse you have is to be very, very clear in presenting the scientific data that essentially contradicts that.
So essentially what Dr. Fauci is saying is it seems he's out there supporting the idea, although he doesn't say it, of taking down these kinds of videos because he's saying that we don't have enough data to show that this is actually working to prove or demonstrate its efficacy. We need to follow the science, and we need to make sure that the science is out there to present it in order to contradict the false information that's out there, essentially summarizing what Dr. Fauci was saying there. Jenny Beth Martin, what do you make of that sort of attitude when it seems pretty clear that something's wrong here relative to Dr. Fauci in that analysis?
Well, the fact is, how are you going to contribute to the body of knowledge within science, if you're not sharing information? If the doctors, all that we've done is brought doctors together who've been communicating online about this medication and other treatment options for COVID. If you're going to just say, well, you can only talk about things that have been double blind tested, study tested, whatever it is that the FDA and Dr. Fauci and the NIH all deem are appropriate things to talk about, how will you ever figure out what other doctors are thinking? How will you ever figure out what else other doctors are doing so maybe they can improve what they're doing? You can't just shut down that kind of communication. It doesn't help. One, so it doesn't help science. Number two, it is not constitutional. We have a First Amendment right to express ourselves, especially when we're standing in front of the Supreme Court of the United States in one of the only free speech zones that aren't even regulated in Washington, D.C. And third, I was looking at that video, and behind Andrea Mitchell, they have this huge map with every single case in the country in big bright red spots, and it's 4.31, I think, million people who have been tested and are confirmed cases. It may not be people, but confirmed cases. And we know roughly a little bit over 150,000 people have died today. That means that those families are without their loved ones. And I know that that is a sad and difficult thing for those families. What they're not showing is that there are over 3 million people who have survived this virus right now. And if it was 4.31, then there are over roughly 4.1 million people who have survived the virus. But they're not conveying that. So it winds up making everyone so much more scared than maybe they need to be. It doesn't mean the virus isn't serious, but we need to be fair about how we're handling the virus and try to get facts out over fear. That's not what they're doing. They're sensationalizing it all.
And if we can save lives by treating patients early in this way, and especially prevent an overrun of the hospitalizations, why wouldn't you want to do it? So final question for you, Jenny Beth Martin, again, founder of Tea Party Patriots, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. What do you think people really need to keep in mind in the coming 2-3 months as we deal with reopening more, getting schools back into action, and the ongoing debate over tech censorship of these types of messages that go against what they would like to see, their chosen narratives, and also in terms of the broader debates that we're seeing over hydroxychloroquine and handling the pandemic in terms of policy? What should people keep in mind?
I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is what just happened to us. Pay attention to what you're seeing on television and understand that you are seeing it through the filter of editors, whether it's online, on social media, or it's on television. And make sure that you are looking to find more information, and then verify that what you are hearing and seeing is factual. One reason I was confident that I could go stand with these doctors and talk about the things that we were talking about specifically at the press conference and within the summit is that there were doctors around the country that were all saying the same thing over and over and over to me. And I've reached out to my own doctors. I've reached out to my school board. I'm doing my own research. And I urge every American, go talk to your own doctor and get your own personal health assessment. Do not rely on the television or social media or Dr. Google to figure out what's right for you and your family.
Don't. Dr. Google, yes. Do not just count on Dr. Google. Talk with your physician. No, it's such an important point. I mean, that's the point of having a doctor. And hopefully the doctor will give you the honest assessment, even about a drug like hydroxychloroquine and a combination like we're talking about, because one of the things that was disturbing that was coming up in the Frontline Doctors Summit was about how doctors are not talking about or prescribing it not because of the science, not because there's an absence of data, but because of the politicization and the idea that you could be persona non grata if you prescribe that medication.
That's exactly right. And that's why I say ask, is it FDA approved? Mm-hmm. Is it safe? Just get the facts about it, whether they're going to prescribe it to you or not. Make sure that you understand we are talking about a 65-year-old FDA approved drug that is safer than Tylenol.
Jenny Beth Martin, founder of Tea Party Patriots. Great to check in with you again. Keep up the good work, and I appreciate you talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Once again, Jenny Beth Martin joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. And yeah, I mean, you got to think about this summit, the Frontline Doctors Summit, and the idea that tech platforms could and would censor this type of content is pretty darn stunning. I have the article in front of me. The key to defeating COVID-19 already exists. We need to start using it. In Newsweek, Dr. Harvey A. Risch, MD, PhD, professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health. And Dr. Risch says, look, it's not the end-all and be-all. And especially if you're far down the process, probably not going to work. But early on, it can be effective and has been demonstrated effective. The point that I want to underscore, though, is stop getting in the way of the doctor-patient relationship. Stop discouraging treatments that can work, and stop discouraging doctors from doing what's in the best interest of their patients. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Doctors and patients together, joining up and making decisions about what's in the best interest of the patient. And bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., politicians at state capitals, they're not going to be able to make that same kind of decision, both because of expertise, they're not going to know your personal situation, and so forth. Theme of the day, once again, get government more out of the way and let individuals make decisions on what's in their own best interest. Thanks for watching this clip of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't miss more engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe today to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel. You do not want to miss our live show. Thanks for your support.
I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah. Awesome.